Welcome to the Inspired Action Podcast. This is where we have motivational, inspiring conversations and interviews that we hope you'll enjoy listening to. If you're interested in creating more balance in your life, understanding your 5-element energetic nature, finding the path of greatest ease,
or releasing the baggage of this lifetime and discovering ancient alchemy that can help you fly in your life, join us and other inspired actioneers on this alchemical transformational journey.
Welcome to the Inspired Action Podcast. My name is Jay, and this is Pod 57. And I'm here with my co-host, as always, Lita Herman.
Hey, everyone. Today, we're going to continue our podcast series on Happy on the Way to Happiness.
That's right. Welcome back, Inspired Actioneers. And you know, Lita, Happy on the Way to Happiness is getting a lot of people, well, happy. At least a little happier.
Yes. And in fact, we heard from one of our listeners the other day how happy the last podcast made her.
It was
awesome. Really exciting to hear that.
You know, and so I think this week, let's go even deeper. You know, we did some great work on unraveling the tentacles around our hearts in Pod 56. Let's talk today about how we can become free from the expectations that we perceive society is putting on us.
Yes. And by society, you know, you mean family, friends, even coworkers, bosses, your teachers, your neighbors.
Ding, 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 ding. Check that box, check that box. Yes, everyone around you has ideas about what you should be doing, who you should be. Guess what? It's up to you. If happiness is indeed linked to a sense of freedom in our lives, then these expectations people are putting on us are, guess what? Limiting us.
Yes.
We want unlimited. We want limitless. My favorite word.
And, you know, I mean, at worst, it feels like a prison.
Yeah. They're limiting us. They're imprisoning us. They take away our sense of freedom through obligations, duty, and
politeness, propriety. Yes. So we love this word limitless because that's...
Happiness can be limitless.
Yes.
Yeah.
So free yourself, free your heart. Why not go for happiness? You know, today we have a great podcast for you where we're going to talk about how to be free and still be a part of your community and society.
I like your positive attitude. It's going to be great. Yes. But, you know, before we begin on the greatness of this podcast, let's talk about what we have going on. And I think we should start with 5-Element Fridays.
5-Element Fridays.
It's a big hit. Everyone loves it all over the world.
We're jumping into Earth this week on our 5-Element Friday segment, and it's big, it's bold, and it's all about the Earthlings. And if you're Earth, you're going to love our Facebook group if you haven't joined it already. In fact, all of the elemental types are going to love our Facebook group. So check it out, Inspired Action Podcast on the Facebook groups.
Yes, you can be an inspired actioneer there. And if you ask a question there and we use it on the show, or if you email us a question and we use it on the show, guess what? We're going to kick out an IAP t-shirt. Yes. And we're going to just get that out to you as soon as possible. We're trying to accommodate as many sizes as we can, but you know, we're doing so pretty good so far.
Yes. And you know, you can always check us out also for any upcoming workshops or books that we have coming out soon.
We just jamming all over the place here.
Yeah.
You know?
We even have an email list. If you go to our website, inspiredactionpodcast.com, and sign up for our email list.
That's another way to be in the loop.
That's another way to be in the loop.
All right, so let's go. Let's get back to this podcast. You know, I love talking about the virtues, and that's what we're talking about today. You know, Lita, before we go bashing society and, you know, my anti-social media, let's begin by saying that living in a society creates a collective set of rules to live by, which teaches us all to be good citizens. I'm not knocking that. I'm not bashing that. I'm not saying we should just burn it all to the ground.
Yes,
you know?
and really, Jay, we're taught since we're little children that there are a number of values that society enforces. And in Chinese philosophy, we call these the 5 virtues. And they help uphold a civilized society.
Yeah, Confucius, he was big into the 5 virtues, right?
Yes, this is all from Confucius. I mean, at least he really espoused them. And he was all about putting society before the individual. And in many ways, these rules are really good because without them, who knows what society would be like?
Wild West, crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Just crazy, yeah.
Bunch of wild beasts we'd be. I think it'd be like Lord of the Flies. You remember that book when in grammar school that you had to read? High school.
Grammar school.
Somewhere around there.
Somewhere between grammar school and high school.
I think 8th grade. Anyway, everyone in that book was for themselves. They didn't really have any virtues. So virtues are these rules that are essential to society. And the more people there are, the more more we need these governing mores and values that we can all agree upon.
However, when we create a civilized society, we're putting the greater community above the individual by taking away some level of personal freedoms. In many ways, that's some levels of our happiness.
Yes, and because feeling limited often causes unhappiness, being a good citizen of the world may mean we're compromising ourselves.
Well, you know what, Lita? How can we work this out? How can we have both? How can we be limitless yet still be in society?
Well, we have a few choices. First, you could go find some mountain somewhere, some remote mountaintop, but there's very few of those places left in the world, I think, now that everything's melting and so you could run away to the North Pole if there's any bit of the North Pole left to run away to.
Are there mountains in the North Pole?
I don't think so.
Anyway, just glaciers.
Glaciers. And then you can live your personal freedom there because no one's around to tell you what to do. Or you can move to New York City with the most compact places of civilization and still choose not to follow the societal norms. But you could also be arrested because you're not going to follow the laws. You're not going to be polite, so that you'll meet people like that in New York City all the time, right?
Totally. But that's half the city.
Yeah, that's a hard road too, And so is the answer somewhere in between?
So you're saying either you decide to run away to a remote place like a melting glacier
right,
or a crazy sidewalk in New York City. But either place, you don't have to be part of society. But really, is that really the freedom? I don't know.
No. Even if you are a loner, isolation of that type for many people does not bring happiness and would not be a viable way to achieve your happiness.
Yeah, that's a great point. Human connection is one of those great sources of happiness. In general, I think the hermit may work for some people as the lesser of two evils, but it doesn't mean happiness. I think we're meant to be in packs and circles and families and communities. And if you might need to get away for a while.
Yeah.
But I think for a long-term plan, it's very, very difficult to achieve that level of happiness that we're talking about today.
Yeah. And when we talk about the Alchemist, they did go away to the mountains for a little bit of time, but they truly believed that you had to be a part of society to experience all the things that life is worth living for.
I think they dropped out of the big society and created their own community.
Yes.
Of like-minded people.
Yes, that too. And so that's another way to do it is put together your group of like-minded people. I love that.
Yeah, not cult.
Yeah, not cult. Yeah, well, yeah, right.
But so there you go, though. There's another
choice.
Facet of that go down for me.
Yes.
Right to the cult. It sounded cult-like. Yeah, so, the isolation is just something to think about. I'm not judging. These are purely observations. Anyone into cult, do not get mad at me. I did not mean that in a disrespectful way. But there's the other possibility to figure this out is how do you live within the confines of society and still be free?
Yes, and so this is the ticket. Again, this is the Alchemist's path. In order to walk that path, you need to identify and understand society's expectations of you.
I know, I said confines.
Yeah.
That's a restricting word right there.
Yeah, and how can you exercise your own virtues and what you need in life without ending up in jail or being cast out and excommunicated from your community?
Which is not cool.
No, excommunication, being kicked out of your community is actually might be the most painful thing that can happen to a human being. They've done studies on this.
Especially if you're stoned.
Yo,
painful,
literally.
Yes, literally. No. Excommunicated and then stoned.
Okay. So it's devastating to be kicked out of your clan or your tribe. And I always use the example of years ago when NASA did those major cutbacks and just fired a bunch of highly skilled, high-level intellectuals who were PhDs in all kinds of science. They fired them. And they were put out on the streets with no jobs, and they were so overqualified for any other job that they couldn't find a community to belong to.
Yeah, that's really tough.
And I heard that many of them were driving taxi cabs or waiting on tables. Nothing wrong with that, but they couldn't really fit in.
And they got thrown out of their own
Yeah.
community, and then they couldn't fit in.
And
Yeah.
they said that this was the most depressing thing that could happen to anyone, really, when you're kicked out of your community and now you don't belong anywhere. It's really devastating.
So, Lita, how does the alchemist or the inspired actionaire walk that fine line between a good doobie and being authentic to yourself and not be necessarily holed up in a cabin on a mountain or a glacier for an extended amount of time?
Well, maybe we just have to stop giving a bleep what other people think.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah. Without chaos
Yes.
ensuing. Because if we all just didn't give a bleep, then
Yeah. Right. So
it would be bleeping.
Yeah,
A lot of
so-
bleeping.
So you want to be your authentic self, but you also want to be part of a community. And that's what today is about. How do we do both those things?
You know, I guess the trick is to understand the social virtues. It's really not what you want to do, but benefits your clan, community, family, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and then from that understanding, you can embrace a new set of virtues that are essential for your own individual authenticity.
Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit about the different sets of the virtues?
Okay, so there are two sets of virtues in Chinese philosophy. The first set is the one we just spoke about, the Confucius set, which is the main set given to us as children. And I think that applies to us in the US or Europe or any Australia. We have people listening all over the world, but it's
Like
not
Western society?
Yeah, it's not just a Chinese philosophy or Eastern society. These virtues are also just given to children all over the world because it's about living in society. And society gives these virtues to us at an early age through our parents, through our schools. It's impossible to escape them.
Yeah. And then the second set?
The second set comes from Taoist traditions, and it can be embraced often later in life. Many people call this their midlife crisis.
We like to call it midlife transition.
Yes, and we sometimes even see the 20-somethings figure this out early on, and that is an incredible good luck because to embrace these second set of virtues at an early age of like 25, 28, that's awesome. You'll save yourself a lot of possible grief later on by saying, look at how society wants me to be and do all this, and that's not who I am.
You know, Lita, I see more young people, maybe in their 20s, the 20-somethings. They're doing this more these days than I think ever before. It's a great thing. I think everyone should be doing it.
And I think parents of the 20-something generation have been trying to help kids cultivate their authenticity more than any of our previous generations did.
Yeah, we do live in a society that really enforces individuality and, everyone counts and all that stuff.
Especially because in the U.S., we have more of a wood-like society. If you go to Japan, you're going to see more compliance with the society.
We talked about this a little bit in the last podcast.
We did.
So, we've been working on our tentacles, Lita. But, let's talk about now how we can look at how society puts a lot of guilt, judgment on us, which can then create these tentacles.
Yes.
Finally, we're getting to it.
Yes, so let's jump into that first set of Confucian virtues that is what causes a lot of these issues.
So the social norms, then they create tentacles when you don't comply. Is that what we're saying?
Or maybe you are complying, and that's what's creating the tentacles.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go. Let's jump. I'm ready.
Okay, so the first virtue is benevolence, or what you could simply call kindness. It's our humanity, really, our compassion, and this is our wood virtue.
Yeah, it's a nice virtue for sure. I'm not just saying that because I'm wood.
It's about treating everyone with a basic level of kindness and fairness. And it's the belief that everyone deserves the same basic level of kindness.
Yeah, that's a good part of society for sure. Benevolence, as we said, is the wood virtue. And I can say if someone falls down the well, even if I don't like them, I'm going to rescue them.
You definitely will.
Okay, I'd still pull them out. No one deserves to die in a well or fall in a well or hit their head in the well, whatever. Even your enemies deserve the kindness, the human kindness of that situation. But if you really have an issue, then you can kick their butt afterwards when you save their butt. Bleep, 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 bleep.
There's also a way that wood people want to stand up for those who are weaker and who can't fight for themselves. So society says we should go to war for others who aren't able to fight. And woods take that to heart, especially.
Yeah, and most wood people are not for war. They're for strategy. We've talked about this in many of the other podcasts. They'll do anything but go to war. They'll try any strategy, anything to remove the obstacle before they go to war.
There's a great book called The Art of War, if people aren't aware of that
That's
one.
a wood handbook.
It's the wood handbook, but oddly, it's how to maintain peace.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's where the virtue gets us in trouble. Is going to war really on your heart's path? Or do you even agree with the war's purpose? I think we're seeing this all the time in society right now because everything seems to be going like fluey there. If you don't go fight for another person because you are thinking about the individual's destiny, then the question is, will you feel guilty if you don't go help those in need? So it's a tough, tough question.
And truly, we've all been told that we should do good deeds for the sake of society. But when that means we have to give up doing something we really want to do or we feel like we're destined to do for the sake of others, then we're potentially creating our own unhappiness. Or if we follow our own destiny and then not be the hero everyone wants us to be, do we develop guilt, which wraps its tentacle around our heart? So this is a big source of heart pain for many people, not just woods, but wood people often think they have to protect and take care of a lot of people. And the question is, at what cost? What are they sacrificing of themselves for that? Let's move on to the second virtue.
Yes, which is morality, which is a sense of righteousness and doing the right thing ethically. And that is definitely a fire virtue.
Yes, and I like to call it morality, but some people call it compassion. And it means do unto others what you would have done to you, basically. And so you could say it's all about treating others according to how they should be treated based on their good or bad behavior. So it's kind of the opposite of benevolence. It's like, leave that bad person down in the well.
Yeah, they deserve it, maybe.
Yeah. If they don't deserve to be treated well because they're bad, then you should not treat them equal to everyone else. So there's a huge component of ethics with this one and a lot of judgmentalness.
Yeah, well, I think the fires take this a little bit even further because they want to be liked, they want to be loved, not wanting to hurt other people's feelings, since fires hate it when their feelings get hurt.
Yeah, so how can you ever tell someone the truth if it's going to hurt their feelings? This is what fire people struggle with all the time. It's this kind of situation that puts you into a moral quandary. So fires especially don't always say what they need to say. And this can even extend to people having like a marital affair because they just don't want to tell their partner that they're unhappy and want to leave them. So they go cheat on them.
Yeah, because they don't want them to not like them or love them.
Yes.
Yeah, all of the elements have to grapple with this virtue, not just the fires. You can have fire in any of the one of the 5 stuck-ups there. Society says we should be nice to each other and be good, but then we get into these moral dilemmas like you just explained. What do we do?
So here's an example. If you're going to sell a car, this is another moral dilemma. Do you tell them everything that's wrong with the car before you tell them what's good about the car?
If you're fire.
If you're fire, you do. You're acting with compassion because you tell them what you'd want to know, which is all the possible bad things. And so this virtue, it's about not wanting to sell someone a lemon and then be thought of as a bad person. So you want to be a good person. So if you're fire, you don't want someone to think you're doing something unethical. So you overcompensate.
Yeah, but oddly, you might be convincing them not to buy the car by emphasizing everything bad instead of helping a person who really might want to get the car, to get stuck with it. You might scare them off with your negativity.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, there isn't even a ghost point about this. It's called ghost market. And it's this way that we can talk people out of doing things that they're actually really meant to do. So anyway,
that's another whole slippery
That's a
slope.
whole other thing. We'll put a little link in the show notes to where we talk about that in another podcast. There are so many ways this virtue affects our lives. What if you really should be saying something, but society tells you to be polite? So then you don't say it, and then everyone suffers because it was actually really important.
So there's a number of questions here, Lita, that I'm thinking of, like they're just popping in my head. Do you feel guilty if you think you want to do something that society is perceived as wrong? That's the first one.
Yes, or how about, do you feel guilty saying what you really need to say, even if it will hurt someone?
Yeah. Do you feel guilty even if you don't tell them everything and anything that's wrong?
Yes.
That's another one.
Yes. So there's also the times when people want to be perceived as doing the right thing so badly that they neglect everyone else, like their loved ones, their families. They sort of overdo things just so there's no appearance that they're doing something bad or illegal.
Yeah.
It's like you can lose sight of what's important and you can be out of alignment.
Oddly, it makes me think of the alchemists that are amoral.
Yes.
Where there's no good or bad.
Morality is for the saints and immorality is for the sinners. But amorality, which is the lack of morals altogether, is not immoral but it's amoral. And that's a hard concept. It's like, how do you...
Yeah, society doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Okay, morality is the backbone of the controlling society. So we're not like the Lord of the Flies there.
Yes. And the irony of the fire element, on the one hand, they want everyone to like them. So they're trying to do what everyone wants them to do, and they don't like to be wrong at the same time. So they're wanting to be perceived as right. They hate to be wrong. On the other hand, they are the supreme controllers. That's what we call the fire element. And they're 100% in charge of their own destinies and will do whatever they want for their individual selves. So to have these two dynamics at the same time, you have to be a really good liar. You're trying to pull off the biggest con in the whole world, which is, I'm doing this thing that's really good for me, but you don't know that. And I'm telling you that it's really good for you.
The truth is, you're doing it for yourself, not for the other people, but you want everyone else to think you're doing it for them because then everyone will like you. And
Yes.
they'll think you're selfless and you're doing stuff for everyone else.
Yes, society says we shouldn't be selfish.
Yeah.
And it's not ethical. It's not moral. Selflessness is the good way to be.
So, Lita, with this virtue, the fires especially try to appear selfless, but in truth, they're totally on their own path. That's exhausting and it sounds really hard. How do we kind of combat that?
It's
Or
super
do we
duper.
try?
Yeah, it's super duper hard. And I think the fires really walk this line a lot. And the more they mature, the more they realize that, and this is why we have a second set of virtues. So we're not going to talk about those second set of virtues today, but we're going to talk about that next podcast. But to kind of resolve this, they have to kind of come to a better place in themselves.
Isn't that all the elements we're talking about here? Yeah.
So we're going to go through the 5 sort of societal virtues today. So we're going to go on to earth next. And then next podcast, we're going to talk about sort of how to resolve these issues.
So as the elements, as you evolve, you kind of work
Yes.
through this. All right. So the third is earth. We call it social compliance. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's this feeling that you need to comply with the social norms, like any rites or rituals of your particular community. For example, if someone in your family dies, there's a funeral and you have to go. I mean, you have to go, especially if it's a close relative, right?
Like, even if it's a friend of a neighbor of a cousin's friend, you go.
Yeah,
usually.
right. But you're not allowed to say, I don't feel like it today. No, and then why do you have to wear black? Who said that? Like, it's a societal thing.
Don't question it and suddenly wear red and polka dots.
Right.
I mean, you can, no judgment, right?
Right. If you showed up in red, it would be really like people would freak out, right?
Well, you would just be bucking the social norms.
Yes, exactly.
Earth probably would never do that.
Right. An earth person especially is going to really want to have that social compliance and be appropriate.
Made me think of Star Trek when Spock
Yes.
said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Yes, it's a perfect quote because
He would not show up in red.
No, he would not. So the earth virtue is called like social compliance, and we are supposed to do what others expect of us and the things that we're good at, which means we're not necessarily doing what we love.
We talked about this in another podcast about if you're a really bad singer and you want to sing, an earth person might say, honey, don't do it for the good of all of us. Put us out of our misery by just stop singing.
Yes.
and maybe just tell them to go sing in the shower.
Yes.
And don't hurt their feelings.
Oh,
but-
honey, please don't. And what about all those famous singers who really didn't sing well, but still brought us a lot of great music.
I know we always mention Tom Waits, but there's so many of them. I mean,
Bob Dylan.
Yeah, Nora Jones, Natalie Merchant. They were all told at some point that they really couldn't sing, but that did not stop them. They did not listen to those people.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of people who didn't let social compliance stop them. They listened to their hearts and they followed their true paths.
Yeah, and the way I understand the social compliance virtue, it's also based on boundaries. So people in society know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Think how Earth so easily can point out bad behaviors like, whoa, that behavior you're exhibiting is not appropriate. Don't do that. You cannot treat someone that way. They're always looking out for that, I think. It's kind of like, I think maybe a big part of the Me Too movement. It's very touching and personal, but it's showing that the norms are not being followed, and that's not cool.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the Me Too movement is an earth movement. It's saying these are now the new boundaries.
Yeah.
This is what it's appropriate, and that behavior is not appropriate.
Yeah, so comply socially, social compliance.
Social compliance. So people are empowered now by society to say that that is not okay. And we all agree that we shouldn't be crappy to each other and that these are inappropriate behaviors.
Oddly, I think for Earth people, they suffer a lot by confining themselves. Of all the elements, they have the hardest time of breaking free and being limitless. They feel like they have to act appropriate all the time. And that's one of the challenges that they have. It's harder for them if they're really, just trying to conform all the time to do what feels good to them. Yeah. They have strict confines in their own mind of how a person should behave, and they try to follow that.
Yes. So the question is, do you go by society's values or do you do your own thing? And if you do your own thing, do you then feel guilty that you're not doing what everyone else wants you to do?
Boy, that guilt's coming up in all of them, huh?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
society plays some big head games, doesn't it?
It's definitely, yeah. So it comes in different ways. So far, we've done 3, and all 3 have had that in there.
Yes.
So let's move to the 4th. The 4th metal virtue is loyalty, or some call it devotion. The sense that your family deserves your utmost devotion and you must respect your elders.
Yes, so loyalty to family or even to country.
Yeah, definitely.
So the metal virtue of loyalty is about putting your family above strangers.
Yeah, and again, I like what you said about how the elements mature, and we'll talk about that in the next podcast. But this is a little trickier to see, I think, than some of the other ones, but it's definitely there.
I know someone whose family wants her to spend time with them, but it's really hard to have a love relationship when you're always being pulled away by your family.
I know. At first you think it's earth.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a metal thing.
It's a metal thing. So any partner is eventually going to be upset that you're always taking off with your family. And what happens when 2 important events happen at the same time? One with your family and one with your partner. Who do you pick? Who do you put first?
What if your family is not so nice or disrespectful and you're still picking them over your partner? Should you do anything? Should you say anything? Or you keep doing everything for them and just, society would say, yes, they're your family.
Yeah.
Keep doing it. We see it all the time.
We see it all the time.
Yeah.
Family first. So if your family says they want the best for you, but insist you do things that you don't want to do, then do you do what they ask of you?
I hear tentacles coming.
Yeah. That society says be loyal, for the family's sake.
Yeah, maybe you stay home and take care of your sick mother, even though you're meant to be president of the United States.
Now the rest of us are suffering because you didn't go be president.
You missed your calling. Yes. Tentacle. I mean, so that's another. We actually could do a whole show on each one of these. I'm hearing us talking. I'm like, boy, we could go on and on and on and on.
And on.
But I think the metal one, like I said, from when I talk about it with people, it gets confused as an earth. Because they think Earth is family, family, family.
Yes.
And, I think this metal one we could explain a little bit more. But you do see it in countries, country over party. We're seeing that in the U.S. right now. Country over party lines.
Yes. And if you go back to the Chinese culture, ancestral worship or just, the devotion to your ancestors is big in China, not so much in the West, but still very prevalent here.
Yeah.
And I think that applies again to your community, your country, for example. I definitely think loyalty to country is much more of a mental thing than earth.
And you might see that in the UK.
Yes.
You might see that in Japan, where
All
the metal
over.
is really, really
yeah,
strong.
where the metal's really strong.
Yeah.
There's a strong sense of identity as a country or as a group of people. And you obviously might feel the need to put that above your own destiny.
Yeah, and that might be for respect, which is also metal.
Yes.
All these different metal qualities that come into that. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fifth water virtue is trust, which is the belief that you are taken care of by your family or society. So you have a sense of faith in blind acceptance. Let's talk about that a little bit.
You'd think this would be an awesome virtue, and on some levels it is. We talk about trust with a capital T all the time, but the trust that we're talking about here is the one that society teaches us, and it's a little bit tricky.
How about on the US dollar? We put it there, in God we trust. If that's not a
Yes.
water statement, boink,
Yeah. And it's a little tricky. You should always trust the US dollar because God has blessed it. What if the dollar crashes? You don't believe that will happen because you trust it when society believes in it.
We have that on our money. In God we trust.
Yeah.
Wow. That's I haven't really thought about it like that as a virtue. Wow. Okay, so trust also comes from your mother. Is that like the mother country, the mother nation? I don't know. Now I'm thinking about this whole dollar thing. I'm going to go look at all the money. Does it have it on every one of them? I think so, right?
So, now, if you had a good mother, hopefully she took care of you when you cried and she made you feel safe and taught you to trust that there's a presence in life that takes care of you. So then you grow up and society is supposed to take care of you. This is what society tells us. You're supposed to get a good job with maybe a corporation that you should trust.
Or a company, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
will be there for you and do right by you. Then you go to retire and you can trust that the money you saved will be there for you and the government will help you in your old age.
So you stay at the same place, you work hard, you do your
Yeah.
time, you help the corporation or the company move forward by
Yes.
doing your part.
Yeah, and you're a good doopy, right? You followed all the rules of society.
How
and
does
now,
it fit into religion? You're making me think about these world religions.
Yeah, well, religion also tells you that there's a divine presence looking out over us and looking at overlooking the greater good of humankind. And these are all levels of trust that society gives us because, religion is very tied up in society.
Very
as well.
tough. So the big question is, do you trust in yourself or do you trust what society says is safe? What makes you feel safe? What makes you feel trust? And, all the way down inside of you in your heart, I guess. Do you pick the safe path or you dare to do what you want to do?
It makes me think of people who were like in their late 50s who I don't know if it happens a lot still today, but I remember there was a period of time where a lot of people were getting fired right before their retirement.
Oh, yeah.
And they trusted these companies like with everything. They believed in this retirement and somehow it got pulled out from under them right at the last minute.
Yep.
And
It still happens.
I think it still happens.
But there was a time when it went really...
Yeah. And that's a perfect example where we're told by society, don't worry, we're going to take care of you. And then for some reason, you didn't get taken care of. So that is the kind of trust that we're talking about.
So they took the safe path, but then it kind of... didn't work out. Wow. So these, again, this is as the elements mature and we go through that. So you can start to look at these as virtues, examining them in your life. See how they are for you.
There's one more really important example, and that is, let's say you want to be an artist.
Yep.
But society says, that's not safe. That's not an income you can really count on. You should be an accountant. So millions of people have made this choice, and that is also the water elements issue. You pick the safe path instead of your heart path. I'm not saying all water people do that. There's plenty of water artists out there.
Sure.
But they have learned to trust on something else
On a
other
bigger
than society.
picture thing. Yeah, okay. We say it almost every podcast. Be the watcher. Look and see if this is something that you think is resonating with you. It
Yes.
could be the water virtue.
So decide, are you following society's suggestions Or are you living by your own rules and morals?
And Lita, there's no wrong or right here. It's just being honest with yourself. What is influencing you? Is society's judgment of how you should be and what you should do, is that what you're following? If that's the case, fine. Own it. Be it. Go with it.
And decide, is that how you want to live? And if it's not, do you want to make the changes? Do you want to transform this current situation you're in?
Yeah. So if you're at a job you really don't like and you're doing it because it's a family member or it's your family tradition or it's whatever has been imposed on you from society, maybe it would be a good idea to look at that more closely to see, we also talked about the suffering. Are you suffering? What would happen if you lived for yourself and maybe changed careers and became that artist or that dancer or that performer or whatever?
Yeah. So let's leave the listeners with that bit of homework. Really take a look at these 5 virtues and how you exhibit them or not in your life.
Are you being the hero and trying to take care of everyone, especially when they can't do it for themselves? That would be the wood benevolence.
Or are you constantly grappling with morality and good and bad? That's the fire element.
Yeah. Or are you complying so much with social guidelines that you have no freedom to be yourself?
That would be the earth
That would
perspective.
be the earth.
Or maybe you've been controlled by your family and you really want to break free from them, but you're metal. And
that would be the metal virtues, yeah. Or maybe the last one here, if you're playing it safe all the time, you can't really trust that you can do something radically different, but you really want to trust.
Yes.
That would be the water.
So you can see how these virtues can hold you back. How do they hold you back? And if they do you have tentacles that have come and wrapped around your heart as a result?
Yeah, and we're not going to tell you right now how to solve that. That's going to be in the next podcast.
So
we'll discuss,
tuned.
a new set of virtues that'll help you be your authentic self. So keep listening. Maybe go back and listen to those explanations again and really get a sense of, wow, maybe that is where I am at.
Yeah.
And there's, again, no right or wrong, no good or bad, no judgment here.
Just
this
honesty.
Honesty
of
with
where you
yourself.
Yep.
Have an honest conversation with yourself. All right, Lita.
All right.
Have a good one. Thank you for being here. Bye.
Bye.
Happy trails to you until we meet again.
You've been listening to the Inspired Action Podcast, and you've reached the end. Woohoo! Why not celebrate a little bit and click that subscribe button right there. We love having you with us on this journey, and we want it to continue.
You can also rate and review this podcast. And if you have already, thank you so much. We read all reviews, and your reviews help other people find this podcast as well. You can also be a part of this podcast yourself by submitting a voice recording message and emailing it to us at lita@inspiredactionpodcast.com or jay@inspiredactionpodcast.com.
And if you want, you can join our Facebook group or follow us on Instagram.
Join us next week for another Inspired Action conversation. And thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening, and remember to hug the dog.